Ernest Henry Shackleton was born February 15, 1874, in County Kildare, Ireland. He was raised in London, where his family moved when Shackleton was a young boy. As a young man, he went on 2 expeditions to the Arctic, but both times he had to return home early for various reasons. After his first 2 failed attempts, Shackleton had an obsession of reaching the pole. On August 1, 1914, the same day Germany declared war on Russia, Shackleton departed London on the ship named Endurance with his crew of 28 men for his 3rd trip to the South Pole. The high-ranking members of the voyage consisted of Shackleton, the leader, Frank Wild, who was second in command, and Frank Worsley, a captain and navigator. There were 3 officers, 2 engineers, 2 surgeons, and 4 different science specialists. There were 2 stokers, an artist, 1 photographer, a motor expert, a carpenter, a cook, and 4 able seamen. On December 5, 1914, the team departed. This was the last time Shackleton and his men would touch land for 497 days. As the ship got further south, the crew started seeing more and more ice. Eventually, the Endurance battled her way through 1,000 miles of pack ice over a 6-week period and was 100 miles, 1-day sail from her destination, when on the 18th of January 1915, the ice closed in around her. The ship was drifting to the southwest with the ice. Men with heavy iron bars tried breaking the ice up near the ship, but it didn't have any effect. By the end of February, temperatures had fallen and were regularly negative 68 degrees Fahrenheit. The ship was now clearly frozen in for the winter. Most worrying of all was the pressure from the ice. Everyone knew that one of 2 things would happen. Either the pack ice would thaw, break up, and disperse in the spring, so freeing the ship, or it would consolidate and crush the ship. The Endurance was under heavy pressure from the ice, and Shackleton wrote that the ship was crushed beyond all hope of ever being righted. After weighing his options and assessing the ship's condition, Shackleton decided that they must abandon ship. The Endurance had been stuck in the ice for 281 days. Shackleton ordered the boats, gear, provisions, and sledges to be lowered onto the ice. The Endurance finally broke up and sank below the ice and waters of the Weddell Sea on November 21, 1915. The men had saved as much supplies as they could. The 28 men were now isolated on drifting ice, hundreds of miles from land, with no ship, no means of communication with the outside world, and with limited supplies. On December 20th, Shackleton decided that the time had come to abandon their camp and march westward. The group struggled with the difficult task of dragging their supplies along with 3 lifeboats across the ice. They made landfall on Elephant Island. It had been 497 days since they had last set foot on land. The crew was stranded far from civilization, with no one knowing where they were or what their condition was. No radio at that time was capable of summoning help. The outside world was not going to come to Elephant Island. Shackleton realized that the only way he was going to save his men was to travel to the whaling station in South Georgia, 800 miles away, and across the most stormy stretch of ocean in the entire world. They expected to encounter waves that were 50 feet high. They had almost no means of correct navigation, and they were dependent on sightings of the sun that could sometimes not be seen for weeks in the overcast weather. The party left behind on Elephant Island used the 2 remaining lifeboats to make a hut. They were turned upside down and placed on top of 2 low stone walls. Conditions were cramped and food was short in supply. Frostbite was common and limbs had to be amputated by 2 surgeons. The rescue party set off on the 24th of April in a small lifeboat. The crew was Shackleton, Worsley, Crean, McNeish, McCarthy, and Vincent. The anticipated journey time was a month. It was to become one of the most astonishing small boat journeys of all time. The sea constantly came in and made everything, including the sleeping bags, wet. It was difficult to find any warmth at all. Frostbite was beginning to affect exposed fingers and hands in the cold and constant wet. Navigation was also a problem due to the continually overcast weather. On the 7th day at sea, Worsley was able to take a reading from the sun. He calculated that they were almost halfway to South Georgia. On May 7th, Worsley again was able to take another reading and reckoned that they were not more than 100 miles from their destination. Another 2 days with the wind with them, and they should have the island within sight. On the morning of the 8th of May, they caught a glimpse of South Georgia, only 14 days after leaving Elephant Island, and about half as long as they thought the journey would take. Had they failed to reach the island, the boat would have been swept onwards to be lost in the mid-Atlantic, and no rescue party would have set out for the men on Elephant Island. When they landed, there was still a major obstacle to overcome. They were 26 miles from the whaling station where there was help. In order to get there, they had to go across 26 miles of mountains and glaciers that ran the length of South Georgia, a journey that no one had ever managed. McNeish and Vincent were too weak to attempt the journey, so Shackleton left them with McCarthy to care for them. On May 15th, the last 3 men, Shackleton, Crean, and Worsley, set out to cross the mountains and reach the whaling station. They crossed glaciers, icy slopes, and snowfields. At 1:30 p.m., they climbed the final ridge and